Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Media Launch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
Once again into the breach, Bob. And thanks to the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions, we will once again try to do some analysis and commentary on what's percolating in the news, what went before, and what may be coming ahead. So we're pre-taping, and when this airs next Monday, some of the things that will still probably be in the news will, of course, be the Republican presidential primary in whatever state it's in.
Right.
But
They're, as we tape, I guess they're still in Wisconsin. At least they're still holding rallies and whatnot out there.
I think you're right. In fact, I know you're right. The question is, I believe Scott Walker, the Wisconsin governor, just endorsed Ted Cruz.
Yes.
Which, I guess Ted Cruz is the last of the, quote, establishment Republicans that might have a chance of getting in the way of Donald Trump's juggernaut. But good old John Kasich is still hanging in, and he's the one who seems to be trying to at least put some sanity into the Republican side of the race.
Right. The New York Times has endorsed Kasich as far as Republicans go because of just that reason. He's the sort of the only beacon of reasonable and measured thought on that side of the primary, and it's surprising that he doesn't get the coverage when he does speak, because we know that Trump and Cruz, whenever they cough, the media, and we have to blame the media for that, tend to rush to see what's going to come out, and Kasich often ends up with the short end.
That's because Kasich doesn't say stupid, crazy things. Case in point, because Brussels, Europe is still staggering from the last terrorist attack, and there are still allegations about Brussels being lax on security and not tracking these people who leave Europe, go to Syria, go to the ISIS territory, get trained, come back, and they're already known to be cells and affiliated with ISIS or Al-Qaeda. There was a reporter in the New York Times who did some amazing work on actually digging into how lax the Europeans were, especially those folks in Brussels, about tracking these people.
Really?
Yeah. I managed to catch the tag end of an interview Rachel Maddow did with her on MSNBC, and it was astounding how much evidence she could have dug up herself on stuff that if she could dig it up, you would think the governments over there could have. And so they just were being extraordinarily lax. But that kind of stuff has been percolating in the news.
And as you know, terrorists tend to hit soft targets. And if she could find out what was soft, obviously they could too.
She wasn't so much picking the targets as tracking the terrorists.
Okay.
Which is what they should be doing, because if you can track them, then you know to keep an eye on them, and you know where they are, and you can actually find out who they're associating with and what they may be up to.
I see.
So I was dumbfounded and flabbergasted about what she was able to do that those governments evidently couldn't. And because I basically woke up on my couch and was not fully alert, didn't write down the name of the New York Times reporter,
Okay.
but I don't even want to try to pull it off because
Okay.
I just mangle it. But those types of stories, whether or not Boko Haram is on the verge of extinction in Africa or not, those are actual substantive stories that the press should be paying attention to, and they're basically off on the fringe now because of the gutter politics that's been going on. But I don't want to get into gutter politics.
Right.
I want to talk about the actual domestic reaction to the Brussels attack, which still dumbfounds me, because I know Donald Trump immediately claimed that the Europeans were, quote, weak and soft, and that's why they're going to be hit, and they'll be hit over again, and that's why we need our waterboarding, and we'll bring back that and more. But even Trump's usual rant was not as what I call totally off the wall as Ted Cruz.
Okay.
I mean,
Now that's interesting because obviously it's usually the other way around, and we're usually looking for Ted to at least rein in Trump a little bit, which he doesn't always do. But in this case, you're saying it was just the reverse.
yes, because Ted Cruz actually came out and called for U.S. police departments to immediately start surveilling communities that had Islamic, Muslim populations so that we could become more safe from terrorism and terrorist activity. I do believe that there were some folks in New York and New Jersey who filed suit against the New York Police Department when they tried to profile people
Right, exactly.
in the cities in Brooklyn and in New York City, and they even went over to New Jersey, invaded another territorial area trying
Right.
to do this.
Right.
And so it was interesting. I mean, you got some stuff on the immediate pushback that Ted Cruz got.
We had been through this before in terms of New York covering dealing with terrorism, and the NYPD did have the surveillance of Muslim neighborhoods for a while, and they ended up taking that back.
Yeah, for two reasons.
Through just the public pressure you were talking about.
Yeah.
But Ted Cruz did upset Police Commissioner Bill Bratton here in New York City.
Bill Bratton immediately pushed back. I mean, and the words weren't out of Ted Cruz's mouth, and Bill Bratton was in front of a microphone. Bill Bratton and Mayor de Blasio were in front of microphones.
And I'd like to pull out Bill Bratton's quote because he was so quick in. Here we go. Bill Bratton, and I'll just read from motherjones.com. I should give credit to the websites I read from. Host Anderson Krupa pressed Cruz repeatedly on his stance, noting that New York City Police Commissioner William Bratton had criticized Cruz's proposal. Quote, "It's clear from his comments that Senator Cruz knows absolutely nothing about counterterrorism in New York City," Bratton said. And he's saying that out of experience. We've been there, we've done that, it doesn't work, and now here's Cruz saying that, oh, that's what you ought to do.
And as I believe Mayor de Blasio also said, kind of unconstitutional.
Yes, yes. By the way, also unconstitutional.
Yeah. But Ted Cruz doubled down. He was on all the other morning talk shows talking about, oh no, we need to be doing just that because otherwise we'll be suffering, whatever his quotes were.
What bothers me about Cruz is that he's such a good salesman. He'll say something off the wall and say it in such a way that there's some logic, that you would think there's logic to it when there's no logic there.
You have put your finger on the pulse of what we've been saying for a long time. Donald Trump sounds crazy and sounds like a buffoon. So a lot of people will actually dismiss him, even though there are a ton of Republican voters, which we might try to analyze a little bit, who mostly agree with him. But Ted Cruz is much more dangerous than Donald Trump. Because just what you said, he can make it sound like it's sensible and that it means something and that it's something we should be believing and doing. Whereas when you hear Trump, you go, well, where's he coming from?
Right.
So that's the difference between the two. But even before it got this tight and knocked down with him, that's what we were saying way back last year.
Right.
Of all those crazies on the far right in the Republican race, even the guy who sounds the craziest isn't the most dangerous.
Right.
And so maybe some folks will begin to realize that when Ted Cruz keeps speaking. We shall see.
Even the Republican establishment is afraid of Ted Cruz because he's been working with them for the longest time. They know what he can do. They know what kind of shutdown work he can do. And so now they're measuring their response every time he says something because it's dangerous for the establishment to go attack him because they want to win an election somehow.
The interesting thing about it is so many of the, quote, establishment Republicans are now so deathly afraid of Donald Trump that they're throwing their marbles into Ted Cruz's can.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically like Scott Walker coming out to support him, like Chris Christie jumping on his bandwagon,
Absolutely.
jumping on the Trump bandwagon,
Right.
because he thought
Right.
he's got a much higher profile.
Exactly.
But the rest of these folk are all sliding over to Ted Cruz. So it's going to be interesting to see how that stuff plays out. But before we get back into the depths of this Republican race and just all this presidential politics, I want to go back to Bill Bratton and a more local story, because the interesting thing is, folks, we've beat up on Commissioner Bratton more than once because of stop and frisk and a bunch of other things where he was not quite in the right.
Mm-hmm. No.
But the interesting thing is there was another one of these New York NYPD incidents involving the, quote, plainclothes group of New York NYPD folk and a U.S. postal worker. Bob, you got a little bit more on that story. Because Bratton made sure he came out on the run, let's give some background on who the postal worker was, what was happening.
Well, basically, Glenn Grays is a postal worker in Brooklyn, in New York City, and he was making his rounds in his truck. And at one point, his truck got almost sideswiped. I guess he was about to exit, and a car came past so close that it almost hit him, or at least he was afraid it would hit him. Mm-hmm. So he stepped out of his truck and he said something to the car that went by, and he was mad, and he said some words, and then he went back to his route. As he gets to the door to deliver a package, I guess, the police officers, that's what it turned out
to be, plainclothes police officers in that car that almost ran him over.
Right, and then they wanted to have a word with him at the door. And it started out with the officers asking for his ID, and he said, my ID's in the truck. And the officers said, well, let's go get the ID. And he said, well, I need to deliver this package. And so it went down from there. But there was
escalated, yes, and deteriorated.
Right, exactly. And it ended up with the postal worker in handcuffs. For what reason, even the police commissioner and the mayor still don't know.
Could not understand. And so now there is a investigation.
Yes.
Right? And my understanding is those, quote, plainclothes officers have been removed from their other duties and put on some other
they're not on whatever duty they were on at that moment. Right. And there is a question as to why they were in plain clothes to begin with.
Yes, I heard that.
And so now there's
I heard the commissioner was surprised that they were in plain clothes. So there is something going on there in the New York Police Department that the commissioner was not happy with.
No. but we both applaud his speed in responding to this, because that does not always happen. And
yes.
Little kudo for that.
He did not say my guys are in the right, as always seems to be the case.
Right.
He says there's something not quite right here. We're going to get to the bottom of this. So yes.
And I need to ask you, because I haven't heard anything back from the person we usually hear from, which is Mr. Lynch from the PBA. Has he had anything?
I haven't heard a word from him.
Neither have I.
I mean, I haven't seen any comments or anything from him.
Surprisingly silent on this point.
Yes. Interesting. So if he's silent, something's not quite kosher in Policeville.
Yes.
So, yeah, I a tip of the hat to the commissioner for standing up for at least an impartial investigation, so that this young man evidently still has to have some sort of desk appearance on a supposed assault or resisting arrest charge.
Disorderly conduct,
Disorderly conduct,
yeah.
That's what it is, a disorderly conduct charge that these plainclothesmen lodged against him as a way of covering whatever for their behavior.
Right, and I'm not sure if the story I read is from today or yesterday, but he still hasn't returned to work, the postal worker.
Yeah, he has not.
He's upset, obviously.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that disorderly conduct thing plays out and how that investigation plays out. That's one of the stories I think we're going to have to assiduously keep an eye on, so we can update you folks on. So now we can circle back to politics. One of the interesting things, we've been talking about who the Donald Trump supporters are. Right. And the reason we've been talking about it on more than one occasion, more than one show, is because there has been this continual escalation of rhetoric, and then not just rhetoric, but actual violence, of people being assaulted, I just saw a headline about some teenage girl being pepper sprayed at another Trump rally.
I believe a 15-year-old. And now they're looking for the person with the pepper spray.
It is just, and so the question is, aside from the sleaze component that's now surfaced between the candidates, like Trump, Cruz, pictures of their wives,
it's astounding the level where this has bottomed out. But I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. The analysis of who these supporters are what a lot of our people have been asking us to do. Some of our resources, people like Joy Elliott and Pearl Duncan, said, look, you need to devote a show to who these people are, because they've changed the entire dynamic of, quote, the Republican Party. They've changed the entire dynamic of the, quote, electorate. And one of the things I've been saying that we've both been sort of tapping into is the fact that this is not a new phenomenon. Trump has become the poster child for 40 years of what the Republican establishment was doing from the time Nixon started his Southern strategy back in the 60s, when they were trying to court Southern Democrats using the race card and the dog whistle stuff and the Willie Horton stuff and all that stuff that they've been feeding into their ether in coded messages and in, as the quote, dog whistle stratosphere that other people supposedly weren't reading, but of course everybody was hip to it. This is what Trump has tapped into on just one side of the spectrum, right? So when they claim that Donald Trump is taking over the Republican Party, no, he's not. He's actually inheriting the baser instinct that the Republican Party has been playing on for 40 plus years.
Are you saying that he's simply more media savvy and more adept at appropriating that history than the others have been?
No, he just bluntly said, I'm not going to use coded language. I'm going to call Mexicans rapists and drug addicts and whatever.
Okay.
That's not coded language.
All right.
That's not dog whistle.
I get you what
and
you're saying.
guess what? There are a whole lot of people out there who go, yes, that's exactly right. That's what we believe in, and that's what we think about. Now, the deeper part of that, and I don't want to read an entire article, but when this airs, this is going to be 2 Sundays back, but a New York Times Sunday Review dated Sunday, March 27th is what I'm quoting from. A gentleman by the name of Nate Cohn, C-O-H-N, had a headline, Trump's Secret Weapon, Blue State Voters. And basically, Cohn analyzes the fact that there are any number of different elements that the Republican establishment knew nothing about, because they're relatively affluent, well-educated, moderate, secular, makes them a natural partner to offset the more populist, religious, and conservative outsider candidates that often rally the party's southern base. But guess what? This year, blue state Republicans have abandoned the establishment for Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump has won every primary in a state carried by Barack Obama in 2012. Every primary, okay? Mr. Trump is expected to win in California and along the Acela corridor on the Northeast, okay?
Okay.
If he eventually gets a majority of delegates to the Republican convention, it will be because of the 15 or so most reliably Democratic states. So the bottom line is he's tapping into a series of disaffected voters who basically the Republican Party was never reaching and had totally ignored. But the interesting thing about Cohn's analysis, and it's a very long column, but it's a very cogent and very pertinent column.
And it's built on numbers. It's built on analysis.
It's built on a number of surveys that people have taken to try to find out who these voters are.
But beyond the surveys, he also did other numerical research, which has nothing to do with feedback from people. But
and he actually went and tapped into some of those statistical analyses gurus like Nate Silver of the 531 fame, okay? But here's the key part that caught my attention. When he draws voters who are both working class and less religious, as in Massachusetts, he can really run up the score. Now, the less religious Republican voters in the Northeast might be a factor in Mr. Trump's strength. That's part of the factor that people are not looking into.
Okay.
Mr. Trump does worst in areas with high church attendance, like Western Michigan or Utah. And to repeat, when he draws voters who are both working class and less religious, as in Massachusetts, he can really run up the score. It's interesting. Another important factor is race. And that's when he came out of the box with the others, the
Okay.
Mexicans as rapists, and the
Right.
so-and-sos and the such and such. This race factor is one of the key important factors. There's been a strong relationship between Mr. Trump's share of the vote by state and measures of racial animosity or bias. Let me repeat that. Another important factor is race. So far, there has been a strong relationship between Mr. Trump's share of the vote by state and measures of racial animosity or bias. While no one suggests that all of Mr. Trump's supporters are racist, surveys show that they are particularly likely to express explicit racial prejudice. And the northeastern states often sit alongside the South at the top of these indicators, despite the Northeast's reputation as a bastion of liberalism.
And that bothered me as soon as we read this the first time before we started taping, because it's telling me that he's dipping into under the skin feelings, and he's motivating people, who the Democrats haven't been able to reach, and he's getting them out and voting and yelling and supporting. And we haven't seen this like even last year. In the campaign, because it's only getting up to speed in 2016. He's really tapping in, but I had not seen this type of statistical analysis
right,
that
right.
backs it up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
part of this analysis is simply web searches on race on.
Well, actually, do you have the quote by Nate Silver or the 531?
I'll try to pull it up while you're looking.
I can find it. No, because Cohn
It's
went to
yeah, it's here.
to other sources to see.
Would you like
There's
me
a
to read it?
remarkably strong correlation, for example, between Mr. Trump's support and the number of racist web searches by state. Notice, web searches.
Right.
Okay? Racist web searches. All right? Nate Silver of 538, and that's the guru of statistical analysis, folks. The 538 blog is run by Nate Silver, who will take statistics and tell you exactly who's going to win what primary, and he'll be on top of it by 2 percentage points. That's how good his statistical analyses are. Well, Nate Silver of 538 said that the measure was the single strongest correlation of support for Mr. Trump that he could find. The racial context.
Right.
The strongest correlation of support for Trump that he could find. So stuff that we've been talking about and saying based on what we've seen with our eyes, these people have actually dug into and analyzed state by state, by searches, by what they're hearing, what's being posted. It's an amazing, amazing cross-section of what's going on in this country right now. So I don't know. We haven't really gotten into analyzing the different segments of those Trump voters. That's going to take another show to actually do it and parse it.
Sure.
But there's a whole new phenomenon that's going on that you can't say Trump is raising Republican voters. He's raising untapped, disaffected, disenfranchised, and to some extent, very racist individuals in this country is what basically is going on.
I mean, if you drop Trump and Cruz into Florida last year without all the rhetoric that we've heard for the last few months, Rubio wins. I mean, but he's managed to capture these folks and bring them out. And I mean, he's motivated people like no other candidate has, which is troubling in many different ways. Now, I used to be a member of the Investigative Reporters and Editors, which is a group of journalists who do just that type of investigative online and web searching and number crunching and
Deep
whatnot.
diving.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to have to go back to the site to see if other people are doing the same thing and getting the same type
Mm-hmm.
of numbers, because, you know, this is one analysis. I'd like to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, and to speak to the other issue that we touched on earlier, the predilection for violence
Mhm.
that shows up at these Trump rallies. There was another media story that I'm not sure we have fully enough time to analyze.
Have about
but,
2 minutes.
But there was a young lady who worked for Breitbart. I don't know if you can pull up her name from your website.
Okay.
But this young lady, basically, Breitbart is a pro-Trump or news, quote, news outlet that pretty much is conservative to the far right. Matter of fact, the Breitbart people were connected to those folks who did the phony investigation of the Acorn people
Right.
down in New
Okay.
Orleans, etc.
Yes.
So that's where they lean. So this young lady was working for them. She was at a Trump rally, and basically
Michelle Fields.
Michelle Fields, that's her name, the Trump key campaign guy, was walking next to Trump, and basically she was asking Trump what was his stance on affirmative action. And she just asked a question. And I know it because Politico published a transcript
Yes.
of what was going on. And evidently the campaign manager was not happy and decided he needed to get her out of the way and grabbed her by the arm in such a forceful way that he almost pulled her to the ground. And so she was really upset. And so there was an exchange between her and a New York Times reporter who basically saw the whole thing. And he said, damn, it was kind of rough, wasn't it? He said, yeah, he almost got me to the ground. Well, the Trump people totally denied it.
Right.
And because they denied it, she said, no, I'm not lying, but the Breitbart news organ did not support her.
Right. But she supported herself and managed to get enough traction. And as of today,
A couple of
yesterday,
her colleagues resigned because they didn't support her.
Right.
But she filed an assault charge
Right.
against that campaign manager. And so
Simple.
that's now working its way through the courts.
Right.
And guess what?
We're just about out of time.
There
Well,
seems
30
to
seconds.
seems to be some credence to what she said.
Okay.
So that's the media reporting on the media.
Yes.
On a totally crazy election campaign. This has been Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube on Media Watch EVT.
And thanks MNN, EVT Educational Productions. And folks, be well, stay strong, and we'll catch you the next time.
Click.